Inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena, two of the world's most famous showmen, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena, were about to learn what happens when entertainment collides with reality. A roaring charity crowd turned expectant when harmless jokes at the expense of Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal crossed an invisible line. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical aging action star. For decades, he'd been a karate world champion and military instructor, famed for his ability to end a fight before it began. Steven Seagal wasn't a performer. Either he was a former law enforcement trainer and Aikido master, known for disabling opponents without ever breaking rhythm. When The Rock and Cena mocked their legends, they thought they were owning the spotlight. What they didn't know was that the spotlight was about to become a lesson in humility. The veteran stepped into the ring, not angry, not boastful, just impossibly calm. Moments later, two of Hollywood's toughest men were flat on the mat. No punches, no theatrics, just perfect precision. What began as a show of arrogance became a public lesson in humility. The Vegas crowd, once laughing, sat in stunned reverence. The world would never see celebrity bravado the same way after that quiet, devastating demonstration of true mastery. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The MGM Grand Garden Arena pulsed with raw energy. Every seat filled, every voice blending into a deafening roar that echoed off the walls. Floodlights beamed down onto the polished octagonal cage at center stage. Cameras flashed like lightning as fans shouted from every corner. Some waved banners. Others leaned forward on the edge of their seats, eyes locked on the main platform, where the night's hosts would soon appear. This wasn't just another fight night. This was Legends of Combat, a charity exhibition, where Hollywood met martial arts, where entertainment merged with tradition, and where generations of fighting philosophies would collide in spectacular fashion. In the middle of this chaos sat two men who seemed untouched by the frenzy around them. Chuck Norris, calm and composed, ringside in the VIP section. Dressed in a simple black button-up and dark jeans, he did not move. No entourage. No attention-seeking. Yet eyes naturally shifted toward him. He sat effortlessly still, one hand resting loosely on his knee, the other by his side. No grin. No cheers. Just focus. Beside him, Steven Seagal leaned back slightly in his chair, his signature all-black attire and tinted glasses giving nothing away. Unlike Chuck's perfectly neutral expression, Seagal wore the faintest hint of a smirk, the kind that suggested he knew something the rest of the arena didn't. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, cutting through the crowd's energy. "Please welcome your hosts for tonight's charity exhibition, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena." The arena erupted as spotlights converged on the entrance ramp. Pyrotechnics exploded in brilliant flashes of gold and silver. The Rock's theme music thundered through the speakers as he emerged, arms spread wide, soaking in the adoration. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that strained against his massive frame, The Rock moved like a man who owned every inch of space he occupied. His smile flashed brilliant white as he raised a microphone to his lips. Finally, he began, letting the word hang in the air as the crowd completed his catchphrase in unison. "The Rock has come back to Vegas." The roar that followed vibrated the very foundations of the arena. Without missing a beat, John Cena's music hit, and the energy somehow doubled as he sprinted down the ramp, sliding under the bottom rope and into the octagon. Where The Rock exuded cool confidence, Cena brought pure electricity, bouncing on the balls of his feet, pumping his fist to the rhythm of his entrance theme. Dressed in a bright blue suit that perfectly matched his energetic persona, Cena grabbed his own microphone. "Vegas," he shouted, voice cutting through the noise. "Are you ready?" The crowd responded with such force that the cage itself seemed to vibrate. Camera operators scrambled to capture every angle as The Rock and Cena circled the octagon, playing to the fans, their chemistry evident in every gesture. Tonight, The Rock continued once the noise had settled to a manageable level. We bring you something special. Not just fights, but a celebration of combat arts across generations. Cena nodded enthusiastically. We've got current champions, rising stars, and... He gestured toward the VIP section. Some of the most legendary names in martial arts history. Cameras panned to where Chuck and Seagal sat, and their stoic faces appeared on the massive screens overhead. A respectful applause rippled through the crowd, not the wild frenzy that had greeted the hosts, but something more reverent. The Rock's smile widened. Look at them, folks. The old guard. The legends. He paused, looking directly at Chuck Norris. When I was a kid watching Walker, Texas Ranger, I used to think Chuck Norris could actually roundhouse kick the world off its axis. Laughter rolled through the arena. Chuck's expression remained unchanged. Remember those Chuck Norris facts? Cena jumped in, unable to contain his energy. Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups, he pushes the earth down. More laughter, louder this time. On the big screen, Chuck maintained his composure, though something flickered behind his eyes, not anger, not even annoyance, just awareness. And Steven Seagal, The Rock continued, turning his attention to the other legend. The man who made breaking wrists an art form. I heard he walks around with oil on his clothes just so he can slip out of any situation. The crowd howled with laughter. Seagal's smirk deepened almost imperceptibly. His fingers tapped once against his knee, the only sign that he'd even registered the comment. But seriously, folks, Cena said, attempting to dial back the teasing. We're honored to have these pioneers with us tonight. They paved the way for all of us who followed. The Rock nodded, though his eyes held a mischievous glint. Absolutely. Though I gotta say, the action star game has evolved a bit since their day, hasn't it? Used to be all about the slow-motion wrist locks and dramatic stares. He demonstrated with exaggerated movements, mimicking Seagal's signature fighting style. The crowd ate it up, laughing harder. Now it's about this. Cena flexed dramatically, showing off his massive biceps. And this! He performed a quick series of moves that showcased his athleticism. In the VIP section, Chuck leaned slightly towards Seagal, whispering something without taking his eyes off the hosts. Seagal nodded once, that knowing smirk still firmly in place. The MC of the event, sensing the escalation, moved to the center of the cage. All right, gentlemen, let's get this show started. Our first exhibition match features... Wait! The Rock interrupted, raising his hand. Before we move on, I think the people want to know. He turned toward the crowd. Don't you want to know which generation had the real fighters? The old school? He gestured toward Chuck and Seagal. Or the new era? He pointed to himself and Cena. The arena filled with cheers and competing chants. Some sections shouted, "Old school," while others countered with, "New era." Cena, caught up in the moment, bounced on his heels. I mean, there's only one way to find out, right? The Rock's eyebrow raised in his signature fashion. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? The MC looked between them nervously. Gentlemen, this isn't on the program. Come on, The Rock said, ignoring the MC and speaking directly to the crowd. Wouldn't you all pay good money to see a little exhibition? The Legends versus... He paused dramatically. The best damn entertainers in the business today? The arena nearly exploded with excitement. Fans jumped to their feet, phones raised high. Social media already buzzing with the possibility. In the VIP section, Chuck and Seagal hadn't moved. Their stillness contrasted sharply with the frenzy around them, like two boulders in a raging river. The MC, recognizing he was losing control of the situation, attempted to regain some semblance of order. "This is a charity exhibition, and we have a scheduled program. And what better for charity than giving these people what they want?" Cena insisted, playing to the crowd. "Come on, Chuck, Steven, what do you say? Just a friendly exhibition. For the fans." Cameras zoomed in on the two veterans. The arena quieted slightly, everyone leaning forward, waiting for their response. Chuck Norris's expression hadn't changed at all. His eyes, sharp and clear despite his age, looked directly into the camera. He didn't speak. He didn't nod. He simply watched the stillness of a man who had mastered patience decades ago. Seagal's smirk, however, widened just a fraction. He leaned toward Chuck again, whispered something that made the corner of Chuck's mouth twitch, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. The Rock, misinterpreting their silence as hesitation, pressed harder. Unless, of course, the legends feel their legacy might be at risk. His tone was teasing, playful, but the challenge was unmistakable. A hush fell over the arena. The joke had pushed just a step too far. Even some fans exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere. And that's when it happened. Chuck Norris stood up. He didn't leap to his feet. He didn't storm toward the cage. He simply rose, a deliberate, unhurried movement that somehow commanded more attention than all the Rock and Cena's theatrics combined. Seagal followed a moment later, adjusting his jacket with casual precision. The crowd fell silent. The Rock's confident smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Well, look at that, folks. Seems like the legends are up for a little demonstration after all." But as Chuck and Seagal made their way toward the cage, their movements measured, their expressions unchanged, a strange energy settled over the arena. The excited chatter diminished to whispers. The thunderous applause softened to scattered clapping. Something was happening, something the crowd could feel but couldn't quite name. The atmosphere had shifted from entertainment to something more primal, more authentic. The MC looked frantically between the approaching legends and the hosts in the cage, clearly calculating how to handle this unexpected development. "Ladies and gentlemen," he finally managed, voice slightly strained, "it seems we may have an impromptu exhibition match. Please be patient as we, make the necessary arrangements." As Chuck and Seagal reached the steps leading to the cage, Cena's boundless energy seemed to falter slightly. He exchanged a quick glance with The Rock, a moment of uncertainty passing between them. But The Rock was too committed now. His pride too engaged. With a wide grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, he called out, "Welcome to the new era, gentlemen. We promise to go easy on you." Neither Chuck nor Seagal bothered to respond. They simply continued their approach. Two silent hunters who knew patience was far more powerful than words. The arena held its collective breath as security personnel scrambled to open the cage door. Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal approached with unhurried confidence, their gazes fixed forward, shoulders relaxed. Neither spoke. Neither played to the cameras that frantically tracked their every movement. Inside the cage, The Rock maintained his showman's grin, though it tightened at the edges as the veterans drew closer. Beside him, Cena shifted his weight from foot to foot, a flicker of doubt crossing his features before he masked it with a bright smile. "Well, folks," The Rock boomed into his microphone, voice deliberately light, "looks like we're about to have ourselves an unscheduled history lesson." The crowd's laughter came more hesitantly now, uncertain, watching the four men like spectators at a nature documentary, sensing a shift in the food chain. The MC rushed forward, visibly sweating in his expensive suit. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we'll be having a special exhibition match. Let me just..." He fumbled with his notes. Adjust our schedule accordingly. In the meantime, let's have a brief intermission while we prepare. No need. Seagal spoke for the first time, his voice low, and even as he reached the cage steps, we're ready now. The simple declaration sent a murmur through the crowd. Chuck nodded once in agreement, his weathered face impassive as he followed Seagal up the steps. The Rock's eyebrows shot up in his signature fashion. Eager, aren't we? No warm-up needed for the legends? He turned to the crowd. That confidence, folks. That's old school right there. But the joke fell flat. The crowd's response was muted, their attention locked on the veterans as they entered the cage with the fluid ease of men who had stepped into countless rings, squared off against innumerable opponents. Cena, sensing the shifting energy, attempted to lighten the mood. Should we explain the rules? You know, things have changed a bit since your day. We don't just karate chop boards anymore. He mimed a chopping motion, grinning. Chuck didn't respond. He simply removed his watch, handing it to a nearby official without taking his eyes off Cena. The gesture, so calm, so deliberate, carried more weight than any trash talk could have. The Rock cleared his throat, his natural charisma pushing through the growing tension. All right, folks, let's make this interesting. How about a tag team format? Me and Cena versus the legends. Keep it light, keep it fun. Seagal finally spoke again, his voice carrying easily despite its quiet tone. No tags necessary. The cage suddenly seemed smaller. Cameras zoomed in on the Rock's face, catching the first genuine flicker of uncertainty before his performer's instinct buried it beneath confidence. All right then, 2-on-2, old school versus new school. The Rock handed his microphone to the MC, then shed his suit jacket with theatrical flair, revealing a tight-fitting shirt that showcased his impressive physique. He flexed dramatically, drawing appreciative cheers. Cena followed suit, removing his jacket and loosening his tie, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Let's give the crowd a show they'll never forget. Neither Chuck nor Seagal made any similar display. They stood in simple readiness, making no adjustments to their clothing, seeking no approval from the crowd. The MC, realizing he was losing control of the situation, attempted to regain some structure. Ladies and gentlemen, what an unexpected treat. An impromptu exhibition between four legends of the screen. Please remember, this is a demonstration only. Demonstration. The Rock interrupted with a wink to the crowd. Right. Just like how I demonstrated my way through WrestleMania. That earned a genuine laugh from the audience, easing some of the tension. The Rock, encouraged, continued playing to the crowd. He circled closer to Chuck, voice lowered but still audible thanks to the arena's acoustics. No hard feelings about the jokes, right? Just having some fun with the fans. Chuck's eyes clear, focused, and carrying decades of experience locked onto the Rock's. He didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't offer any acknowledgement. He simply waited. The Rock, uncomfortable in the silence, turned it into more showmanship. The silent treatment. Classic Chuck Norris, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't waste words because each one costs someone their life. More laughter, though noticeably thinner than before. The Rock turned to Seagal, continuing his performance. And, Steven, I actually studied your work for one of my early roles. That wrist lock thing? He mimed the motion with exaggerated slowness. Though I had to speed it up a bit. Modern audiences, you know, attention spans aren't what they used to be. Seagal's only response was a slight tilt of his head, his eyes unreadable behind tinted glasses. Cena, picking up on the Rock's discomfort, jumped in with his characteristic energy. Hey Rock, maybe they're using that meditation stuff. Getting into the zone, He assumed an exaggerated meditation pose, humming dramatically. The crowd laughed again, but there was an undercurrent of unease now. Something primitive in their collective consciousness recognized the difference between the performed bravado of The Rock and Cena and the authentic stillness of Chuck and Seagal. As the MC tried once more to establish parameters for the impromptu match, Chuck finally moved. With quiet precision, he stepped to the center of the cage, his stance relaxed, yet perfectly balanced. Seagal mirrored his movement, positioning himself with the fluid economy of motion that had become his trademark. Their synchronized movement silenced the arena more effectively than any announcement could have. The Rock and Cena exchanged glances, a wordless communication passing between them. The performance had shifted into something unexpected, and they both knew it. The Rock's natural athleticism took over. He adjusted his stance, his showman's grin giving way to the focused expression of a genuine competitor. Cena, following his lead, moved into position, his playfulness replaced by professional respect. For a moment, all four men stood in perfect stillness. The cage, containing more than just their physical presence, it held two generations, two philosophies, two approaches to both combat and fame. The MC, sensing something beyond his control was unfolding, retreated to the edge of the cage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice hushed with unexpected reverence, "it seems our exhibition is about to begin." The Rock, never one to surrender the spotlight, made one final attempt to control the narrative. "Don't worry, folks. We'll make sure no legends are harmed in the making of this demonstration." He winked at the camera. "Can't say the same for our insurance premiums, though." A scattered laugh rippled through the crowd, but it quickly faded into tense silence. All eyes were locked on the four men, digital displays capturing every heartbeat of anticipation. Seagal turned slightly toward Chuck, the movement almost imperceptible. Chuck nodded, once a gesture so subtle it would have been missed if not for the arena's multiple camera angles broadcasting every detail to the massive screens. And in that simple exchange, something fundamental shifted in the atmosphere. The Rock felt it. Cena felt it. Every person watching felt it. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This was no longer an exhibition. This was no longer entertainment. This was a lesson about to be delivered. The Rock, reading the energy shift, dropped the last of his performance facade. His voice, when he spoke, carried the genuine respect of one athlete to another. "All right then. Let's do this properly." Chuck Norris spoke for the first time since entering the arena. His voice was quiet yet carried easily, decades of command embedded in every syllable. "You first," he said. And with those two words spoken not as a challenge but as a simple statement of fact, the final line was crossed. The spectacle was over. Reality had begun. The moment stretched like a taut wire across the MGM Grand Garden Arena. The Rock stood with his weight balanced perfectly, a lifetime of athletic training evident in his stance. Beside him, Cena had stopped bouncing, his usual kinetic energy channeled into focused readiness. Across from them, Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal remained motionless, two statues carved from decades of discipline. The contrast was stark and impossible to miss. Where The Rock and Cena radiated physical power, the veterans emanated something far more profound: mastery. The MC, sensing a situation beyond his control, retreated to the edge of the cage. Around the arena, phones were raised high, social media already exploding with live updates. Legends Face-Off was trending worldwide within minutes. "Remember, gentlemen," the MC called out nervously, "this is just an exhibition for charity. Keep it friendly." The Rock nodded, his performer's smile returning. "Absolutely. Just a little demonstration for the fans." He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "We'll go easy on the legends, don't worry." A ripple of uncertain laughter moved through the audience. The joke didn't land with its usual confidence, something in The Rock's delivery betraying the first flickers of doubt. Cena, ever the professional, maintained his enthusiastic demeanor. "So how do we do this? Take turns? Show some signature moves?" He directed the question to Chuck and Seagal, his tone genuinely inquiring beneath the showmanship. Seagal's response was quiet, yet carried to every corner of the suddenly silent arena. "Move naturally. We'll respond." 4 simple words that somehow contained volumes. The Rock's eyebrow arched, a flash of genuine uncertainty crossing his features before his showman's instinct buried it. "All right then," The Rock called out, voice booming with affected confidence. "Let's give these people their money's worth." He stepped forward with athletic grace, his massive frame moving with surprising agility. Anyone familiar with his career could see he wasn't approaching this as a theatrical performance anymore. This was The Rock, drawing on his legitimate athletic background, his movements purposeful and controlled. Chuck didn't react. He simply stood, hands loose at his sides, watching The Rock's approach with the patient assessment of a man who had faced countless opponents. Cena remained slightly behind, his role in this improvised moment still undefined. His eyes darted between The Rock and the veterans, professional instinct telling him something unprecedented was unfolding. The Rock circled slightly, closing the distance with measured steps. "You know, I grew up watching your films," he said to Chuck, his voice lower now. "Meant more for the men in the cage than the audience beyond. Learned a lot about what it means to be an action star." Chuck's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement that registered the comment without being swayed by it. The Rock continued his approach, now just a few feet from Chuck. He extended his hand, a gesture of respect before whatever was about to happen. Chuck looked at the offered hand, then back to The Rock's face. With deliberate calm, he accepted the handshake. The crowd murmured in approval, tension easing slightly at this display of sportsmanship. What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the audience would later debate exactly what they'd seen. The Rock, never releasing the handshake, stepped slightly forward, a subtle movement that could have been interpreted as either the beginning of a grapple or simply an adjustment of balance. Only those with trained eyes could identify the competitive advantage he'd attempted to establish through the seemingly respectful gesture. Chuck's response was instantaneous and nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Without appearing to move, he subtly redirected The Rock's momentum, shifting his weight and stance in a way that left the bigger man suddenly, inexplicably off balance. The Rock's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He recovered quickly, athletic instinct kicking in, but not before everyone in the arena sensed the shift in dynamic. That single exchange, lasting less than 2 seconds, had communicated volumes. The Rock stepped back, reassessing. His showman's smile returned, but different now, edged with newfound respect. "Quick reflexes, sir. Very impressive." Chuck inclined his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement. Cena, reading the situation with the instinct of a performer who'd spent years gauging audience reactions, moved forward to join The Rock. "My turn to say hello?" His trademark enthusiasm was tempered now with genuine curiosity. Seagal, who had remained motionless throughout the exchange with Chuck, turned his attention to Cena. Unlike Chuck's complete neutrality, Seagal's expression carried that faint, knowing smirk, the look of a man who had seen this story play out countless times before. Cena approached with his hand extended, having witnessed the previous exchange, and adjusted his strategy accordingly. "Honor to meet you, sir." Grew up watching your films. Seagal accepted the handshake with a nod. Cena, learning from The Rock's experience, maintained a respectful distance, making no attempt to establish dominance through the greeting. The crowd watched in hushed anticipation. The exhibition hadn't truly begun, yet already the dynamic had shifted dramatically from what anyone including The Rock and Cena had expected. "So," The Rock said, his natural charisma reasserting itself, "shall we give them a demonstration? Some basic moves, nothing too—" His words cut off as Chuck made his first deliberate movement. With fluid economy, Chuck shifted his stance, a subtle adjustment that nonetheless commanded complete attention. He raised his hands slightly, assuming a classic defensive posture that contained no aggression, no challenge, simply readiness. Seagal mirrored the movement with his own distinct style, his hands positioned differently but conveying the same message. "We are prepared." The message was unmistakable. The veterans were not here for choreographed demonstrations or playful exchanges. They had accepted a challenge, and they would respond accordingly. The Rock and Cena exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication between two men who, despite their competitive history, found themselves suddenly united by unexpected circumstance. The Rock nodded once, decision made. He adjusted his stance, dropping the last vestiges of showmanship and assuming the posture of a true competitor. Cena followed suit, his expression settling into focused determination. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. The murmurs died away, leaving an electric silence broken only by the soft clicks of thousands of cameras capturing every moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice came softly over the speakers, almost reverent. "It seems our exhibition is about to begin." No one in the arena that night would ever forget what happened next. The Rock moved first, a testing jab, quick and controlled, directed at Chuck with professional precision. The move wasn't aggressive or showy. It was the calculated approach of an athlete, respecting his opponent while measuring capabilities. Chuck didn't block the jab. He simply wasn't there when it arrived. With movement so economical it seemed like optical illusion, he shifted just enough for the strike to miss by millimeters. The Rock blinked, genuinely surprised. He followed immediately with a combination faster this time, still controlled but carrying more intention. Again, Chuck's response defied conventional physics. He redirected rather than blocked, his hands making minimal contact, yet somehow guiding the Rock's momentum away from its intended target. Each movement was precise, efficient, without wasted energy or theatrical flourish. Simultaneously, Cena engaged with Seagal, attempting a grappling approach that showcased his considerable strength. Seagal's response was distinctly different from Chuck's, yet equally effective, a fluid yielding that used Cena's own forward energy to disrupt his balance. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the pattern repeated. The Rock and Cena, both legitimate athletes beyond their entertainment personas, brought increasingly focused skill to the encounter. Yet each attempt was met with responses so perfectly timed, so mathematically precise, that the veterans seemed to be operating with information seconds ahead of the present moment. "This is impossible," someone in the front row whispered. The comment picked up by nearby microphones and transmitted across the arena's sound system. The whisper broke the silence. Suddenly the crowd erupted not in cheers or jeers, but in a collective murmur of disbelief. They were witnessing something beyond spectacle, beyond entertainment. They were seeing the difference between athletic prowess and true mastery. The Rock, never one to accept defeat easily, pressed forward with greater intensity. His movements remained disciplined, but now carried genuine competitive spirit. Cena matched his escalation, bringing his considerable strength and agility fully into play. Neither veteran changed their approach in response. They simply continued their economy of motion, redirecting rather than opposing, guiding rather than blocking. Each response perfectly calibrated to the exact force presented. It was like watching water flow around stone, the younger men's power and speed, impressive but ultimately ineffective against the older men's perfect timing and precision. After nearly 2 minutes of this mesmerizing exchange, The Rock stepped back, breathing slightly elevated but controlled. Genuine respect showed plainly on his face now, the performer's mask completely discarded. "I see," he said simply, the 2 words carrying volumes of understanding. Cena too had paused, a new awareness dawning in his expression. He nodded to Seagal, a gesture of acknowledgement that contained no performance, no camera-ready smile. The arena remained hushed, collective breath held, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. The Rock glanced at Cena, another wordless communication passing between them. Then, with synchronized purpose, both men moved forward together, combining their approach in a coordinated effort that showcased years of professional athleticism. Chuck and Seagal responded as one. What followed lasted less than 5 seconds, but would be replayed millions of times across the world in the days to come. The veterans' movements were so precisely calibrated, so perfectly timed, that The Rock and Cena's coordinated attack seemed to dissolve before it fully formed. Like master mathematicians solving complex equations instantaneously, Chuck and Seagal read the pattern of force and momentum, made microscopic adjustments, and redirected the younger men's considerable energy. One moment, The Rock and Cena were advancing with purpose. The next, they were both on the mat. Neither had been struck with any visible force. Neither had been grappled or thrown in any conventional sense. Yet both found themselves looking up at the arena lights, their bodies registering a reality. Their minds were still processing. The silence that followed was absolute. The Rock blinked twice, his mind working to process what had just happened. Beside him, Cena pushed up onto his elbows, confusion etched across his features. The arena remained suspended in stunned silence, 20,000 people collectively holding their breath. Chuck Norris stood exactly where he had been, his posture unchanged, his expression as neutral as when he'd first entered the cage. Beside him, Seagal's subtle smirk had deepened almost imperceptibly, the only indication that anything significant had occurred. "What just happened?" someone in the front row whispered, voice carrying in the unnatural quiet. The Rock rolled smoothly to his feet, athletic instinct taking over. His showman's smile returned, though different now, touched with genuine humility. "Well," he said, voice pitched to carry through the silence, "I think we just got a proper introduction to the legends." The tension broke. Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by applause that built rapidly into thunderous appreciation. The audience wasn't entirely sure what they'd witnessed, but they recognized they'd seen something extraordinary. Cena rose as well, shaking his head with a rueful smile. That was educational. The MC, sensing an opportunity to guide the unexpected exhibition back to scheduled programming, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, what an impressive demonstration of technique. Let's thank our 4 participants for this unexpected..." "Wait." The Rock's voice cut through the MC's attempted conclusion. He turned to face Chuck directly, his expression stripped of performance, raw with authentic curiosity. "I'd like to understand what happened there." The request hung in the air, simple, direct, honest. For the first time since entering the arena, Chuck's expression shifted slightly. Not a smile, exactly, but an acknowledgement of the genuine inquiry. "You were trying to impress," Chuck said, his voice quiet yet carrying easily across the hushed arena. "We were simply being." 7 words that landed with more impact than any physical technique could have. The Rock stood motionless, absorbing the lesson embedded in the simple statement. Cena moved to stand beside him, his characteristic energy channeled now into focused attention. "Could you show us again?" he asked, the request carrying no hint of challenge, only sincere desire to learn. Seagal glanced at Chuck, that silent communication flowing between them again. Chuck nodded once. "Approach naturally," Seagal said. "Don't perform. Just move with honest intention." The Rock and Cena exchanged glances, a new understanding forming between them. Both men adjusted their stance, shedding the last vestiges of showmanship and camera-ready posturing. The Rock moved first, a direct approach without telegraphing or theatrical setup. His movement was clean, athletic, purposeful, a true expression of his considerable physical gifts without the overlay of performance. Chuck's response seemed almost gentle. With minimal movement, he redirected the Rock's momentum, not opposing force with force, but rather guiding it through the path of least resistance. This time, the Rock remained standing, though he found himself facing a different direction than he'd intended, his balance momentarily compromised. "I felt that," the Rock said, genuine wonder in his voice. "You didn't block me, you just changed the equation." Chuck nodded, the barest hint of approval in his eyes. Cena stepped forward next, attempting a similar approach with Seagal. The result was different in execution but identical in principle. Seagal's economy of motion making Cena's considerable strength seem suddenly irrelevant. "It's not about power," Seagal said, offering rare verbal instruction. "Power creates resistance. Precision eliminates the need for it." The crowd watched in reverent silence as understanding visibly dawned across the Rock and Cena's faces. This was no longer a performance or exhibition, it had transformed into something ancient and profound. The passing of knowledge from master to student. Around the cage, fans lowered their phones slightly, many sensing that they were witnessing something too meaningful to view through screens. Security personnel at the corners relaxed their vigilance, their expressions shifting from professional neutrality to genuine interest. In the front row, several prominent fighters from the main card leaned forward, their competitive analysis giving way to student-like attention. Even the commentators at the broadcast table had fallen silent, no longer attempting to narrate what had clearly transcended sport or entertainment. "When you attacked together," Chuck said, his voice still measured and calm, "what was your intention?" The question caught both younger men off guard. They exchanged glances, neither immediately answering. "To win," the Rock finally offered. "To demonstrate our abilities. To prove ourselves," Cena added, the honesty in his voice resonating across the hushed arena. Chuck nodded, accepting their answers without judgment. "And when we responded, what did you feel?" The Rock considered this carefully, his usual rapid-fire charisma giving way to genuine reflection. "Like my strength suddenly disappeared. Not blocked or countered, just rendered irrelevant. Like hitting fog," Cena added, his expression still registering wonder. "There was nothing to push against, yet I couldn't move forward." Seagal's smirk deepened slightly. Not mockery, but the satisfaction of a teacher whose students were beginning to grasp an essential concept. "In combat sports," he said, his voice carrying the gravity of decades of experience, "you train to overcome resistance. In true martial arts, you train to eliminate the need for resistance altogether." The distinction hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Several people in the audience visibly reacted, martial artists, recognizing a fundamental truth they'd spent years pursuing. Chuck shifted his stance slightly, the motion so economical it barely registered as movement. "One more exchange," he said, his quiet voice nonetheless a command. "Both of you. Full intention. No holding back. The invitation hung in the air for a moment. The Rock and Cena looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Both men nodded, then settled into ready stances. Not the exaggerated poses of their entertainment personas, but the balanced preparation of true athletes. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. Phones rose higher. Cameras zoomed closer. Whatever was about to happen would be worth documenting. "Wait," called a voice from the broadcast table. The veteran commentator had risen from his seat, microphone still in hand. For those watching who may not understand what they're seeing, this is extraordinary. Chuck Norris and Seagal aren't just actors who know martial arts. They're legitimate masters who became actors. His colleague nodded, adding, "What we're witnessing is decades of authentic discipline confronting modern athletic prowess. This isn't about age or strength, it's about fundamentally different approaches to both combat and performance." The analysis silenced conversations throughout the arena. Even those who had come purely for entertainment recognized they were witnessing something significant. Inside the cage, the four men seemed oblivious to the commentary. Their focus had narrowed to this moment, this exchange, this lesson being simultaneously taught and learned. The Rock and Cena moved simultaneously, a coordinated approach born from years of professional experience. They attacked not as entertainers, but as athletes, bringing genuine skill and power to their movement. What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the audience would later swear the arena cameras must have glitched. One moment, The Rock and Cena were advancing with perfect coordination. The next, they were both completely neutralized, their momentum dispersed so effectively that neither man was thrown or struck, yet both found themselves suddenly static, their attacks dissolved before completion. The crowd gasped collectively. Security personnel at the cage's edge instinctively stepped forward, then froze, unsure what they were even responding to. The Rock exhaled slowly, a smile of genuine wonder spreading across his face. "Incredible," he said simply. Cena nodded, eyes wide with newfound understanding. "It's like trying to punch water." Chuck's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had warmed slightly, the silent approval of a teacher whose students had begun to grasp an essential truth. "Now, you understand," Seagal said, the smirk fading into something more genuine respect for their willingness to learn. The arena remained hushed, 20,000 people collectively processing that they had witnessed something far more significant than the exhibition they'd paid for. This wasn't entertainment, it was revelation. The MC, reading the room with professional instinct, made no attempt to hurry the moment. He simply stood at the edge of the cage, as much a spectator as anyone in the audience. In the commentary booth, the veteran analyst leaned toward his microphone. "What we just saw," he said, voice hushed with respect, "is the difference between technical skill and true mastery. Johnson and Cena are legitimately skilled athletes, but Norris and Seagal are operating on a fundamentally different level." His colleague nodded. "It's like watching physics being rewritten in real time. The younger men are working with power, momentum, force, all the principles that dominate modern combat sports. The veterans are demonstrating something more profound, the transcendence of those very principles." Throughout the arena, martial artists of various disciplines nodded in silent understanding. What was mystifying to many spectators was profoundly clear to those who had spent years on the path of true mastery. Inside the cage, The Rock studied Chuck with newfound respect. "One question," he said, his voice carrying the humble tone of a student addressing a master. "Why agree to this? You could have declined the challenge." Chuck's response was immediate, though still delivered in that same measured tone. "Pride is a valuable target. It blinds, creates openings. You needed the lesson, Seagal added, not unkindly. The simplicity of their answer hung in the air, powerful precisely because it contained no malice, no ego, just truth. The Rock and Cena stood motionless, absorbing the wisdom with visible humility. Then, slowly, deliberately, The Rock extended his hand to Chuck, not as a performer seeking approval, but as a genuine gesture of respect. Thank you for the lesson, sir. Chuck accepted the handshake with a slight nod, the first acknowledgement he'd offered since entering the arena. Beside them, Cena and Seagal exchanged a similar gesture. The crowd, sensing the authentic moment unfolding before them, began to applaud softly at first, then building to thunderous appreciation. This wasn't the frenzied reaction to a spectacular fight. It was something deeper, more reverent recognition of timeless wisdom demonstrated with perfect clarity. From the VIP section, several aging martial arts champions rose to their feet, offering the traditional bow of respect toward the cage. Younger fighters throughout the arena followed suit, understanding intuitively what they had witnessed. As the four men stood together in the center of the cage, the contrast between them had never been more apparent, yet paradoxically, they had never seemed more connected. Two generations, two approaches to both combat and fame, momentarily bridged by mutual respect. The digital displays surrounding the arena captured every angle of this unexpected moment. The Rock and Cena, known for their imposing physical presence, somehow appearing smaller beside the veterans despite their superior size. Chuck and Seagal, seemingly unremarkable in physical stature, radiating an intangible authority that transcended mere presence. In the broadcast booth, the commentators struggled to find words equal to the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the veteran analyst finally said, "I've been covering combat sports for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. What began as an impromptu exhibition has become a profound demonstration of what martial arts, at its highest level, truly represents." His colleague nodded. "The real question now is what happens next. After such a demonstration, where do we go from here?" Inside the cage, that very question seemed to hang in the air between the four men. The lesson had been delivered with perfect clarity, but lessons, once taught, demand response. The peaceful moment of mutual respect couldn't last. The dynamics had shifted too dramatically to simply return to the scheduled program. The Rock sensed it first, his performer's intuition registering the energy shift in the arena. The crowd's appreciation was genuine, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of expectation. 20,000 people had witnessed something extraordinary, but extraordinary moments create hunger for resolution, for climax. His expression shifted slightly as he glanced at Cena, a wordless communication passing between them. Both men recognized their responsibility in this unexpected narrative. They had initiated this encounter through arrogance. Humility alone wasn't sufficient to complete the circle. The Rock turned back to Chuck, his decision made. The smile that spread across his face was different from his usual performance grin, more authentic, but carrying a new spark of competitive spirit. "One proper exchange," he said, voice carrying across the hushed arena. "Full contact. Show these people what generations of experience really looks like from both sides." The challenge hung in the air, different from the earlier mockery. This wasn't arrogance now, but genuine respect, seeking genuine demonstration. The Rock wasn't attempting to prove superiority, he was offering the veterans the opportunity to complete the lesson they had begun. Chuck's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not even disapproval, just awareness. Beside him, Seagal's subtle smirk returned, carrying a weight of knowing that made several security personnel at the cage's edge shift nervously. The MC stepped forward again, professional instinct telling him to regain control. "Gentlemen, the exhibition has been more than satisfactory. I think it's time we return to our scheduled One exchange, Seagal interrupted, his quiet voice somehow cutting through both the MC's words and the growing crowd noise. As requested. The arena fell silent once more. Even The Rock seemed momentarily taken aback by the immediate acceptance. He recovered quickly, confidence flowing back into his stance as he nodded with renewed purpose. Perfect. Cena and I will show you what the new generation brings to the table. He glanced at his colleague. Ready? Cena hesitated, a flash of uncertainty crossing his features before professional loyalty won out. He nodded once, settling into a ready stance beside The Rock. The calm before the storm had passed. The lesson was about to take its final, decisive form. The moment of mutual respect hung in the air. A fragile equilibrium that could have concluded the unexpected exhibition with dignity intact for all. The MC sensed it, stepping forward with relief evident in his expression. Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible demonstration of skill and sportsmanship. Let's thank our 4 participants for this remarkable. But The Rock raised his hand, silencing the MC mid-sentence. His expression had shifted the humility of moments before gradually giving way to something else. The performer's pride, perhaps, or the natural competitive spirit that had driven his entire career. Wait, he said, voice carrying easily across the hushed arena. That was educational, but it wasn't a proper exhibition. He turned to face Chuck directly, a new challenge forming in his eyes. People paid to see action, not philosophy. Beside him, Cena shifted uncomfortably, picking up on the dangerous territory his colleague was entering. Rock, he said quietly. I think we've learned what we needed to here. The Rock either didn't hear or chose to ignore the warning. His natural charisma reasserted itself as he played to the crowd. What do you say, folks? Don't you want to see a real exchange? Not just redirections and balance shifts? A murmur rippled through the audience, uncertain at first, then building as The Rock's magnetic presence worked its familiar magic. Scattered cheers erupted from various sections, feeding his confidence. In the front row, a former UFC champion leaned toward his companion. He doesn't understand what he's asking for, the fighter muttered, concern evident in his voice. Those old men aren't playing the same game. His words carried just far enough to reach several nearby spectators, who glanced at him with sudden uncertainty. The ripple effect spread pockets of the crowd growing quiet, even as others continued to respond to The Rock's charismatic appeal. One proper exchange, The Rock continued, eyes never leaving Chuck's impassive face. Full contact. Show these people what generations of experience really looks like from both sides. From the commentary booth, the veteran analyst spoke quietly into his microphone. Johnson is treading dangerous waters here. What we've witnessed so far isn't technique versus technique, it's philosophy versus philosophy. Escalating this to full contact fundamentally misunderstands what Norris and Seagal have been demonstrating. His colleague nodded. There's something almost poignant about it. Johnson's physical prowess is extraordinary, but he's still thinking in terms of force, meeting force. He hasn't fully grasped what these veterans are showing him. In the cage, Chuck's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not even disapproval, just awareness. Beside him, Seagal's subtle smirk returned, carrying a weight of knowing that made several security personnel at the cage's edge shift nervously. The MC stepped forward again, professional instinct telling him to regain control. Gentlemen, the exhibition has been more than satisfactory. I think it's time we return to our scheduled one exchange, Seagal interrupted, his quiet voice somehow cutting through both the MC's words and the growing crowd noise. As requested. The arena fell silent once more. Even The Rock, seemed momentarily taken aback by the immediate acceptance. He recovered quickly, confidence flowing back into his stance as he nodded with renewed purpose. Perfect. Cena and I will show you what the new generation brings to the table. He glanced at his colleague. Ready? Cena hesitated. A flash of uncertainty, crossing his features before professional loyalty won out. He nodded once, settling into a ready stance beside the rock. Chuck and Seagal remained motionless, their calm unshaken by the escalation. They simply waited. Hands loose at their sides, the posture of men who had nothing to prove, yet were willing to demonstrate when necessary. In the VIP section, several martial arts veterans exchanged knowing glances. A silver-haired sensei shook his head slightly, his whispered comment carrying to those nearby. The young ones still don't see it. This isn't about winning or losing. A celebrated kickboxing champion beside him nodded. They think they're asking for a proper fight. What they're about to get is a proper lesson. Throughout the arena, those with trained eyes recognized what was unfolding. Professional fighters, martial arts instructors, even security personnel, with combat backgrounds, all sensed the fundamental miscalculation in The Rock's challenge. On 3, The Rock called out, excitement building in his voice. 1. The crowd leaned forward collectively. Phones raised higher. The energy in the arena shifted, anticipation tinged with unease, as if 20,000 people were simultaneously drawn toward and unsettled by what might happen next. 2. Security personnel exchanged nervous glances, uncertain what protocol applied to this unprecedented situation. Medical staff at the edge of the platform subtly moved closer, professional instinct responding to something their conscious minds hadn't fully identified. 3. What happened next occurred so quickly that despite thousands of cameras recording from every angle, debate would rage for weeks about the precise sequence of events. The Rock and Cena launched forward together, no showmanship now. Just pure athletic prowess channeled into coordinated movement. Their approach was disciplined, powerful, and committed exactly what The Rock had requested. A full exchange. Chuck and Seagal moved in perfect unison, their responses so precisely calibrated they seemed to operate as a single entity. Where earlier they had merely redirected and neutralized, now they answered the direct challenge with direct response. The contact lasted less than 2 seconds. 2 precise movements, one from each veteran, delivered with such economy of motion that many in the audience didn't register them at all. Not brutal strikes or aggressive takedowns, but perfectly placed touches that connected with mathematical precision. The Rock froze mid-motion, eyes widening in genuine shock. Beside him, Cena experienced the same sudden paralysis. For a heartbeat, all 4 men stood in a tableau of suspended animation. Then, as if strings had been cut, The Rock and Cena crumpled to the mat. Not thrown. Not struck down with visible force. Simply rendered instantly unable to maintain their stance. The silence that followed was absolute. 20,000 people collectively held their breath, unable to process what they had just witnessed. In the commentary booth, the veteran analyst sat forward, professional detachment momentarily abandoned. "My God," he whispered into his microphone. "Pressure point manipulation. I haven't seen that executed at that level in 30 years. His colleagues stared at the monitors, struggling to find words. For viewers just joining us, what you're seeing isn't staged. 2 of Hollywood's biggest physical performers just experienced what happens when showmanship meets legitimate mastery. Throughout the arena, martial arts practitioners of various disciplines recognized what they'd witnessed, though few could have replicated it. This wasn't just technique, it was the application of decades of knowledge delivered with perfect precision. Chuck and Seagal hadn't moved from their positions. No victory poses, no dramatic stances, just the same quiet readiness with which they'd entered the cage. Their faces remained composed, neither gloating nor concerned, simply present, fully engaged with the moment, but unattached to its outcome. On the mat, The Rock blinked rapidly, his body responding before his mind fully registered what had happened. He pushed himself to a sitting position, disbelief evident in every line of his face. Beside him, Cena remained motionless a moment longer, before slowly rolling to his side. Medical staff moved toward the cage entrance, but Chuck raised a hand slightly, a minimal gesture that nonetheless halted them immediately. The subtle movement conveyed complete certainty. No assistance was needed. The effect was temporary. This was lesson, not injury. What? What was that? The Rock managed, voice uncharacteristically small in the cavernous silence. Chuck looked down at him, and for the first time since entering the arena, his expression softened slightly. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement teacher to student. The difference, he said simply, between looking strong and being strong. The words landed with more impact than any physical technique could have. The Rock sat motionless, absorbing their weight with visible humility. Seagal extended a hand to Cena, helping him to his feet with surprising gentleness. "Respect isn't in the victory," he said quietly. "It's in knowing when to step back." Cena nodded slowly, genuine understanding dawning in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, the two words carrying volumes of newfound respect. From the commentary booth, the analyst spoke with quiet reverence. "What we just witnessed goes beyond sport or entertainment. Norris and Seagal just demonstrated what martial arts masters have understood for centuries. True power isn't in the application of force, but in the perfect understanding of energy." His colleague nodded. For those wondering exactly what happened, both Johnson and Cena were temporarily incapacitated through precision nerve manipulation. Not dangerous, but completely effective. The kind of technique that requires decades to master and that you rarely see outside of traditional dojos. Throughout the arena, the audience remained in stunned silence. Many who had come expecting entertainment found themselves confronting something more profound, a genuine demonstration of disciplines that had been commercialized and simplified for mass consumption, suddenly restored to their authentic essence. The Rock rose without assistance, his natural dignity reasserting itself as he straightened to his full height. For a moment, he simply stood facing Chuck, all pretense stripped away. Then, with deliberate ceremony, he lowered his head in a formal bow, the gesture of a student acknowledging a master. The simple action broke the spell that had held the arena in silence. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then building rapidly into thunderous appreciation. This wasn't the frenzied response to spectacular violence. It was something deeper, more reverential recognition of timeless wisdom, demonstrated with perfect clarity. Chuck returned the bow with precise dignity, his movement containing neither triumph nor condescension, just acknowledgement of respect properly given. In that moment, the contrast between the two generations had never been more apparent. The Rock physically imposing, charismatic, a man who commanded attention through presence and performance. Chuck, unassuming in stature, composed, a man whose authority came not from demanding recognition, but from embodying principles so completely that recognition became inevitable. Beside them, Cena and Seagal enacted a similar exchange. Cena's bow containing perhaps even deeper understanding, Seagal's acknowledgement carrying the same absence of ego that had characterized his every movement. From the commentary booth, the analysts watched in appreciation. "There's something almost poetic about this moment," the veteran commentator observed. "Johnson and Cena have built careers on projecting power, on being larger than life. Norris and Seagal are showing them what lies beyond performance, the quiet authority that comes when you no longer need to convince anyone of your capabilities." His colleague nodded. It's a different kind of strength altogether. Not about dominating space, but about inhabiting it completely. The moment crystallized something profound for everyone witnessing it. This had never been a competition between young and old, between generations or styles. It had been a lesson about the nature of true strength, delivered not through words or even force, but through the perfect economy of mastery. Throughout the arena, phones captured every angle of this unexpected resolution, the physical giants humbled, not by greater force, but by greater understanding. The veterans neither celebrating victory nor seeking validation, simply present in the completion of what they had begun. The Rock turned to the crowd, his showman's instinct returning but transformed now, channeled into something more authentic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, voice strong with genuine emotion, "this is what decades of discipline looks like. This is what we should all aspire to." The applause redoubled, washing over the four men in waves. Cena stepped forward to stand beside the Rock, nodding his emphatic agreement. "I came in thinking I knew what strength was," Cena admitted, addressing both the veterans and the crowd with equal sincerity. "I'm leaving with a new definition." In the VIP section, the silver-haired sensei smiled in quiet approval. "The true victory," he murmured to his colleagues, "isn't in defeating an opponent. It's in transforming their understanding." The celebrated kickboxer beside him nodded. "The best fight is the one that ends with both sides elevated, not one diminished." Throughout the arena, similar conversations unfolded, professional fighters analyzing the technical perfection they'd witnessed, casual fans processing the unexpected shift from entertainment to education, martial arts practitioners recognizing principles they'd heard described but rarely seen executed with such purity. Chuck and Seagal remained composed amid the adulation, neither seeking nor avoiding the spotlight, simply present, exactly as they had been throughout. Their stillness now carried different weight, not the tension of potential action, but the complete relaxation of purpose fulfilled. The MC, sensing the perfect conclusion to what had become an unexpected highlight of the event, stepped forward with renewed confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation for all four of these remarkable men." As the crowd roared its approval, Chuck turned toward the cage door, Seagal falling into step beside him. Their exit carried the same measured dignity as their entrance. Unhurried, unpretentious, complete. No victory laps. No playing to the cameras. No attempt to extend their moment in the spotlight. Behind them, The Rock and Cena stood side by side, watching their departure with expressions of genuine reverence. Something fundamental had shifted in both men, visible in their posture, in their expressions, in the way they occupied space. Where they had entered the cage as performers projecting strength, they now stood as students who had glimpsed what lay beyond performance. "I don't think I've ever seen anything like that," The Rock said quietly to Cena. The words meant only for his colleague, but picked up by nearby microphones. Cena nodded, still massaging his shoulder where Seagal's precise touch had temporarily disrupted his nervous system. "Makes you wonder what else we don't know." The Rock's laugh carried genuine humility. "Everything. Apparently." As Chuck and Seagal disappeared down the entrance tunnel, the crowd's appreciation followed them, a wave of sound that contained not just excitement or entertainment value, but genuine respect. Something profound had occurred in that cage, something that transcended the spectacle they had paid to witness. The lesson had been delivered, not with words, not with excessive force, but with the quiet precision that only true mastery can provide. And across the arena, 20,000 people recognized, in their various ways, the truth at the heart of what they had witnessed. True strength doesn't announce itself with volume or spectacle. It simply is revealed not in what it claims, but in what it accomplishes. The MGM Grand Garden Arena hummed with a different energy now. The frenzied excitement of earlier had transformed into something more contemplative, more reverent. As Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal made their way back to the floor, every phone tracked their movement, every eye followed their unhurried progress. Behind them in the cage, The Rock rubbed his shoulder, a bemused expression still playing across his features. "Did you feel what I felt?" he asked Cena, voice low enough that only his colleague and the nearest microphones picked it up. Cena nodded, unconsciously massaging his wrist. Like being unplugged from a power source. One second everything's working. The next, he shook his head, words failing to capture the experience. "Not pain," The Rock continued, trying to articulate the sensation. "More like, someone found the off switch I didn't know I had." "Exactly," Cena agreed. "And the craziest part? I could tell they were being gentle. That wasn't even close to what they could have done." The Rock's eyes widened slightly as the implications sank in. "Makes you think twice about all those Chuck Norris jokes, doesn't it?" The two men made their way to the cage door, following the path the veterans had taken moments before. As they descended the steps, the crowd's applause swelled again. Not the adulation that typically greeted their appearances, but something more nuanced, tinged with newfound respect for their willingness to be humbled publicly. In the front row, a renowned martial arts instructor leaned toward his students. "Remember this moment," he said quietly. "You just witnessed the difference between a lifetime of practice and a lifetime of mastery." Nearby, a sports psychologist nodded in agreement. The physical technique was extraordinary. But did you notice the mental discipline? No ego. No need to dominate or humiliate, just the precise application of knowledge. Throughout the arena, similar conversations unfolded, professionals analyzing the technical perfection they'd witnessed, casual fans processing the unexpected shift from entertainment to education, martial arts practitioners recognizing principles they'd heard described but rarely seen executed with such purity. The MC, professional instinct kicking in, attempted to transition back to the scheduled program. "Ladies and gentlemen, what an unexpected treat that was. Now, as we return to our exhibition matches," but his voice faded into the background as the four men converged at the edge of the platform. The arena's cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the moment to massive screens that ensured not a single spectator missed what followed. The Rock extended his hand first, meeting Chuck's gaze directly. "Sir, I owe you an apology. The jokes, the challenge, it was disrespectful." Chuck accepted the handshake with simple dignity. "Respect isn't demanded," he replied, his voice carrying easily despite its measured tone. "It's earned, on both sides." The exchange contained no rancor, no gloating from the victor or resentment from the humbled, just authentic acknowledgement between professionals. Cena stepped forward next, offering his hand to Seagal. "Thank you for the lesson," he said with characteristic directness. "I won't forget it." Seagal's perpetual smirk had softened into something more genuine. "The best fighters," he replied, clasping Cena's hand firmly, "are the ones who understand. They're always students." The crowd absorbed the exchange in hushed appreciation. Social media exploded with real-time reactions, hashtags trending globally within minutes. Number respect the legends, number mastery over showmanship, number the quietest knockout. Nearby, a reporter from a martial arts publication frantically took notes. "This is unprecedented," she whispered to her photographer. "We just witnessed the bridge between generations that the fighting world has needed for decades." Her colleague nodded, checking the images on his camera. "Did you catch what Norris said? Respect isn't demanded, it's earned." That's going to be the quote of the year in our industry. As security formed a protective corridor to guide the four men backstage, something unprecedented occurred. The Rock, never one to surrender the spotlight easily, stepped slightly behind Chuck, gesturing for the veteran to lead the way. The simple action, the younger star consciously ceding precedence to the elder, communicated more than any words could have. The crowd noticed immediately. A new chant began, starting in scattered pockets before swelling to fill the arena. Res. Pect. Res. Pect. Res. Pect. In the commentary booth, the veteran analyst leaned forward. In all my years covering combat sports, I've never seen a moment quite like this, he said, professional detachment momentarily abandoned. What began as entertainment has transformed into something approaching philosophy. His colleague nodded. The cultural significance here is enormous. Johnson and Cena represent the modern approach to both combat and celebrity. Physical, dynamic, constantly visible. Norris and Seagal embody an older tradition, technical, reserved, focused on substance over spectacle. And what we just witnessed, the first commentator continued, was the perfect synthesis of those traditions. Not conflict, but education. Not competition, but transmission of wisdom. Backstage, away from the cameras and roaring crowd, the four men paused in a quiet moment of privacy. The Rock's characteristic energy had returned, though tempered now with genuine humility. I have to ask, he said, still massaging his shoulder. What exactly did you do out there? Chuck's answer came with the same economy as his movements in the cage. Applied pressure to neural pathways. Temporary interruption. Like hitting a reset button, Seagal added. The explanation matter-of-fact, despite the extraordinary skill it described. Cena shook his head in wonderment. They don't teach that in WWE training. A hint of amusement touched Chuck's eyes. Or in most dojos either. How long does it take to learn something like that? The Rock asked. Professional curiosity now fully engaged. Chuck considered the question with characteristic precision. Learning the technique? A few years. Understanding when and why to use it? Decades. The simple distinction landed with unexpected weight. Both younger men fell silent, absorbing a fundamental truth about mastery that had eluded them until this moment. Technique, without wisdom, is merely mechanics. The moment was interrupted by the event coordinator rushing forward. Tablet in hand, face flushed with excitement. Gentlemen, the social media numbers are exploding. We've never seen engagement like this for any exhibition. The charity donations have tripled in the last 10 minutes alone. The Rock showman's instinct immediately recognized the opportunity. We should capitalize on this. Press conference. All four of us together. Unity across generations, mutual respect, the perfect message for the charity. Chuck and Seagal exchanged glances, that silent communication flowing between them once more. Chuck turned back to the Rock with the barest hint of a smile. Your stage, he said simply. We've had our moment. The response caught the Rock by surprise. In his world of constant promotion and maximized exposure, the idea of deliberately stepping back from a spotlight moment was almost inconceivable. You don't want to be part of the press coverage? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. This could be huge revival tours, joint appearances, maybe even film projects together. Seagal's smirk returned, carrying no malice, but infinite understanding. That's your world, he said. Not ours. Not anymore. The simple statement landed with surprising weight. The Rock and Cena stood silent, absorbing a truth about fame and legacy that had never occurred to them before, the power of choosing when to engage, when to step back, when to simply be rather than constantly perform. I don't understand, Cena admitted finally. In your position, I'd be leveraging this moment for everything it's worth. Exactly, Chuck replied. The single word, containing volumes of wisdom. The Rock studied him closely, genuine curiosity overriding professional instinct. Do you ever miss it? The spotlight? The recognition? Chuck's response came without hesitation. Recognition fades. Accomplishment remains. 5 words that carried decades of perspective. The younger men exchanged glances. A shared acknowledgement that they had encountered something beyond their current understanding. A relationship with fame and achievement that transcended the metrics by which they measured success. Before the conversation could continue, the event coordinator's radio crackled with urgent messages. Sir, the press is assembling in the conference room. They're requesting all 4 stars immediately. The Rock looked to Chuck and Seagal, newfound respect evident in his expression. At least let us acknowledge what happened out there. Let us give credit where it's due. Chuck considered this for a moment, then nodded once. Honesty matters. Always, Seagal agreed. As the 4 men made their way toward the press conference, The Rock fell into step beside Chuck. One last question, he said, voice lowered for privacy. Despite the bustling corridor, you could have embarrassed us out there. Made it more dramatic. More final. Why didn't you? Chuck's response came without hesitation, as direct and economical as everything about him. True strength doesn't need to destroy, only to teach. The simplicity of the answer stopped The Rock mid-stride. He stared at Chuck for a long moment, then nodded slowly, a student receiving a final, profound lesson. I'm going to remember that, he said finally. Chuck met his gaze directly. That's the point. The press conference that followed became legendary in entertainment circles, not for controversy or spectacle, but for its rare authenticity. The Rock and Cena spoke with uncharacteristic humility about their experience, openly acknowledging the lesson they'd received both physically and philosophically. Today I learned the difference between being strong and being a master. The Rock told the assembled reporters, his trademark charisma channeled into genuine reflection. These gentlemen, he gestured to Chuck and Seagal, who sat quietly at the same table, showed us that true strength isn't about dominating the spotlight. It's about knowing exactly when and how to use your power. Cena nodded emphatically. As athletes and entertainers, we're trained to project confidence, to own every room we enter. Today we experience something different: power that doesn't need to announce itself, that speaks through precision rather than volume. When reporters directed questions to Chuck and Seagal, their responses remained characteristically concise, deflecting attention rather than seeking it. They praised the charity event's mission, acknowledged the athletic abilities of the younger stars, and consistently redirected focus to the purpose rather than the personalities involved. Will there be a rematch? One reporter asked eagerly, sensing the viral potential. The Rock laughed, genuine humor replacing his earlier wounded pride. I think we've learned our lesson. Thank you very much. Some lessons, Cena added, rubbing his wrist with a rueful smile, only need to be taught once. As the press conference concluded and the 4 men rose to leave, cameras captured one final moment that would be shared millions of times in the days to come. The Rock turned to Chuck and, with sincere respect, asked a question just loud enough for nearby microphones to catch. Any advice for those of us still figuring it out? Chuck's response, delivered with the quiet certainty of a man who had spent decades mastering not just martial arts but himself, contained just 6 words. Let your actions outshout your words. The wisdom echoed across social media platforms, spawned countless memes, and inspired discussions about generational values and authentic strength. But beyond the viral moments and trending hashtags, something more significant had transpired in that Las Vegas arena, a genuine transfer of wisdom, a bridge between generations, a lesson about the nature of true mastery. In the days that followed, The Rock and Cena's public personas showed subtle but noticeable shifts. Their social media posts became less about spectacle and more about substance. Their charitable work received greater emphasis than their personal accomplishments. When interviewed about the event, both spoke with newfound humility about their ongoing journey as students rather than masters. Chuck and Seagal, meanwhile, returned to their lives with the same quiet dignity with which they'd entered the arena. They issued no statements, sought no additional publicity, made no attempt to capitalize on their viral moment. They didn't need to. Their actions had already spoken volumes. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.